Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third event in our month-long Mind Your Mind campaign focused on chef mental health. This is a Chef Network webinar in partnership with BWG Food Service. Today's event is a conversation with Ross Lewis, Chef Patron of Chapter 1 Dublin. Today's session will last approximately 1 hour. All attendees will be automatically muted throughout the session. We will have time for questions at the end of the webinar, and if at any time during the session you would like to submit a question, this can be done via the questions function in your toolbar. We will then ask any audience questions to Ross during the Q&A session. Ruth Hegarty from Chef Network will be chatting with Ross in today's session. I will now pass you over to Ricky O'Brien from our partners BWG Food Service for a quick welcome message.
Thanks a million, Rebecca, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our third webinar in Mind Your Mind month. BWG Food Service are delighted again to partner up with Chefs Network. Today's topic is stepping back from the heat. So I would like to introduce a fellow Cork man living in exile in Dublin like myself, chef patron in one of my favourite restaurants, and I certainly can't wait to get back there. It's Ross Lewis of Chapter 1 with Ruth Hegarty. Thank you.
Good morning, Ross. I think we've
Good morning.
put your sound on. I'm great. How are you?
I have plenty of time to do the hair and makeup anyway.
Yeah, this time. So thanks so much thanks a million for agreeing to chat to us, Ross, this morning. Of course, back in 2019 seems like a very long time ago now. Chef Network honoured you for your leadership in the industry, because I think you really are recognised by the industry as an exemplary leader, and you've had a very distinguished career, but you've also been really, I think, known for the amazing work that you've done in terms of training other chefs and in terms of how you've kind of transformed the culture, and also much more broadly your leadership in the industry, your involvement with Eurotalk and many other really positive forces in the industry. But over the years that I've known you and worked with you, which has been a while now, I think it's fair to say that mental health wasn't kind of central to the topics that we were discussing or concerning ourselves with over the years. But I suppose kind of casting back initially to your own early career and how your career progressed, were there times for you over the years that you were in environments that were very challenging in terms of mental health?
Yeah, I suppose my own passage wasn't too bad in the sense that, you know, I did a couple of years in London and I worked in Geneva for a while, and then I came back to work in the Old Dublin restaurant on Francis Street in 1990. And I actually personally never worked in some of those really tough, hard, ridiculously kitchens with bad environments. So I was lucky. Obviously then, you know, I went to work for myself, and, you know, I think then you create your own environment, and, you know, the drive and the desperation to survive as a new restaurateur and establish yourself as a chef, an employer, and a restaurant, you know, that takes you down a whole different path. And, you know, you can be driven by your own demons as well. And there's no question about it that, you know, through, I suppose, in some ways, the exhaustion of the stress of it, the hard work, the ambition, the drive, that certainly took me down a path where at a certain stage in my career, you know, you kind of feel you're doing okay, but, you know, you think you're up here, but you're actually down here. And it's just was a period that began to dawn on me that very quickly that if I didn't do something about it, I suppose that, you know, I wasn't going to be able to fulfill my ambitions, because, you know, you would just not, you would fall in three pieces basically. And it became very apparent to me that another avenue was needed. And I think that you do get this transformation, I think, when chefs transform from being, you know, just maybe an employee into being an employer, and then transitioning from a young chef full of energy in your 20s and full of adrenaline, and there's no tomorrow and so on and so forth, to realizing that the restaurant industry is really about an exchange of energy, and as you get older that energy isn't quite so readily available. So if you don't treat the machine a little bit better, the machine isn't going to last. And so that was my moment of lightness, I suppose. Yeah.
And were there any particular things that happened, or any signs that really kind of brought you to the realization that you needed to kind of change how you were doing things?
Yeah, just, I suppose, really a general feeling of, I suppose, living on the realms of exhaustion, and people around just saying, you need to do something about this. In my own case, my wife, and I then I had a kind of period of ill health. I had a tumor diagnosed in my thyroid, actually, and despite I had a 60-70% chance of malignancy, I had half of it taken out, and I had waited a very nervous 3 weeks for them to tell me that it was actually benign, not malignant. And I suppose there's nothing like that to straighten the mind. The absence of all alternatives clears the mind marvelously. And in that case, I just decided, obviously the thyroid is very important, has a very important function. It controls the metabolism of all your major organs. And so I just couldn't see myself, if I had no thyroid, that I would be able to even, continue my career. And they just said to me, if you're going to go anything, it'll be underactive. And if that happens, it'll happen the first 5 years. So I just said, so at that stage then, I went to see somebody, and I was going to a homeopath and a doctor as well that had a very broad vision in terms of how he treated people, a different outlook, and so on and so forth. On top of that, unfortunately, I didn't know it, but I was suffering from sleep apnea as well. So I had that diagnosed. So you can imagine now, with sleep deprivation, all the hard work. I always put it down to the hard work and the long hours and the stress, the business, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so all these kind of things come in on you, and but effectively, anyway, look, these things can happen to everybody and anybody, and they will happen to everybody who does those kind of crazy hours. Now, I was obviously doing over and above what employees were doing, because this, I think, as anyone who may be listening that, has made that transformation from working as an employee to employing even one person, the added layers of stress, of responsibility, employing some people now is a very responsible position, and it can't be taken lightly. I know that when I went into the business first, I myself was in the kitchen, Martin Corbett was out the front, and that was just it. You went for it, there weren't the kind of, I suppose there wasn't the awareness, the regulations, the HR, and so on and so forth. And over the years, obviously, for the right reasons, these have grown. And, so now we, obviously, we try to run our business like any small enterprise. We put in as many structures as we can, to deal with everything. But having said that, you are you're running your finance department, you're running your HR, you're running everything, the maintenance department, the cooking, the hiring, the PR. I mean, PR is huge as well, so there were all these things that were there, that you just didn't really have to engage in times gone by. It was a simpler format, but sure, there you go. That's it.
Yeah, and I suppose during the period when you kind of came to the realization around, the hours that you were working and your energy levels, and the potential for health issues, on a personal level, I suppose, what kind of changes did you make, or what tools and techniques did you develop that have helped you?
Yeah, well, I suppose there's a two-strand answer to that. One was with regards to business. I mean, the tendency for anyone who owns a business to take on the entire responsibility of running the business. And, you know, you do get into the habit of doing that. And I suppose you allow too much of a build up and all the problems land in your lap, and you just, as I suppose in my case, as a matter of expediency and needing to deal with things very quickly and make decisions very quickly rather than bat them off and give them to somebody else. I just, you know, got in there and just sorted it out. And, you know, you get into the habit of doing that. And I just realized at one stage that I was kind of drowning in my own business, that, you know, I wasn't really enjoying it. It was just, you know, a constant struggle of me versus the world. And although I always had, you know, some good people around me, I suppose I would have put more good people around me at an early stage, because what happens to businesses, they go from a small business doing, say in the restaurant world, doing, you know, a moderate amount of covers to doing more covers, and then to being, in our case, you know, overly successful. And I didn't really put the right kind of structures and people. I would have hired, I suppose, better people at an earlier stage, or people with more experience at an early stage, and people who could take more responsibility. And therefore would have left me free to kind of run the business while stepping back and seeing, you know, what actually needs to be done. Because if you combine running a business with having to, the restaurant industry is having to try and move forward all the time and keep up with, you know, not only domestic but international standards. It's a very small world now in terms of how you operate and who you're compared to. And, you know, I suppose when you go into the world of Michelin stars, then, you know, there's a kind of an international level of comparison, so on and so forth. And, you know, as a younger person, you fall into all these kind of insecurities and so on and so forth. So, you know, running the business and the pressure you put on yourself to keep moving forward, you know, as I said, I felt that I was just drowning in my own business. So, you know, I said to somebody, you know, I always, you know, I love what I do, but there was a period of time that I didn't enjoy the business. I wasn't getting any enjoyment from it. You know, going to work was like a 14, 15 hour kind of slog. And it was kind of day in, day out, and then you recovered on your time off and you went back and you did the same gladiatorial things. And so the first thing I realized is that we do need to kind of have somebody to look at how we are structured on what we're doing, and, you know, who's taking on what, and, you know, why are some of us feeling, you know, under too much pressure. And the second thing for me, I suppose, then that was the business side, and then there's the health side. And I suppose the health side, you know, as I said, I decided that I needed to do other things. I mean, you know, it's, as I said, it's like a machine. If you put the wrong things into it, like my typical day would be, sometimes I would turn around at 5 o'clock and say, Jesus Christ, I haven't eaten today yet. But I'd have 15 cups of coffee. I used at that stage take sugar, so it's like the evil word nowadays. But anyway, I used to have about 2 or 3 teaspoons of sugar in each cup, and then, you know, I might eat something at 6 o'clock, and then I get through, and then it's all adrenaline, and then, you know, back into it at the same time. And, you know, my times off are, I suppose, more occupied with, like, you know, thinking I deserve to go down to the pub and have 10 pints, and so on and so forth, as every young fella does. And I suppose really it was just work stress, not eating well. I mean, can you imagine, there you are surrounded by all this food, and you know, might be eating what's there for staff, and in those days it could be like, you know, whatever, chips and an omelette or whatever, you know, and it mightn't necessarily. And, you know, I actually, you become kind of, you have this kind of, like, I suppose, affluent malnutrition where you're eating stuff, but it's all carbs, and, you know, it's coffee and sugar. And I started to get vitamin deficiencies and twitches. I was short, I think, shortage of magnesium, I think it was. But I thought it was just like falling apart totally. I said, I mean, geez, I've got MS, I've got everything, you know. So it was kind of a mad, it was a mad time. And I just realized that, you know, everything I was doing wasn't really good for you physically. And then, you know, if you're not right physically, you're definitely, you know, healthy body, healthy mind, and so on and so forth. So I kind of you know, I started, you know, making sure I ate properly. I started taking, you know, proper vitamins and so on and so forth. And my salvation, you know, came actually when I found cycling in 2013. I had made, you know, efforts to exercise up to then. I hate running. It's just like, you know, I just hate running. It's like I wasn't born to run. I don't know. I think I'm too top heavy, like most chefs. But anyway, it's a funny thing. And so I used to do a little bit of gym stuff, and I kind of got into a routine, and that was grand. But I found cycling, and for me, that was just great. You know, I had played, you know, a bit of golf over the years, but it's just like, you know, it takes too long, and it's like you're out there, and it's like thinking about golf is that if you don't play very often, you just play shit golf, and so that used to frustrate me even more. The competitive side is coming out again, and so I started cycling, and through that, it's been magnificent because you know, you can go out on your own for an hour, you can join people and go for 3 hours. Once a year, I try to, you know, pick off something, and I do. Like I cycled up from Mont Ventoux a couple of years ago. Did cycle Paris to Nice. Every year I pick something, so I have to train for it. Because the problem is that I think, like most, what I find anyway with myself, and I'm sure I'm typical to most other chefs, is that because your work life is so demanding, I just don't want to know about time constraints when I'm off. Like my wife's continually saying to me, like, we have to be there at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. I'm like, I'm off. I don't want to know about like 10 o'clock. It's a complete natural kind of reaction to, you know, always having to watch the clock, always being on the clock, and then, you know, just not wanting that pressure when I'm not at work. And so,
Ross,
you know,
you finally solved a mystery for me there as to why chefs are not able to keep the time schedules for things. Of all these years, I haven't understood it. Now I do.
I know, yeah. And so coincidentally, you know, like the other, you know, would I get up on Sunday morning at 8:30 or 8 o'clock to go cycling with people? I just go, oh, nah, you know what, I wouldn't. But, you know, because I would pick something that I train for, and I lock into people who are like a training group. So then it gives me the discipline to, like, you know, otherwise I'd be like up in the Wicklow Hills on Sunday morning at 8:30, 9 o'clock on what am I doing this for, you know? But like, you know, you know, if I can lock into something and create that discipline, then that's fine, you know. The other thing is that, like, you know, the funny thing I find is that when somebody says to me, you know, look, on the 5th of March, they're like, I don't even listen to the end of the sentence, because it's, for me, all I hear is the 5th of March. Like, that's 9 weeks away. What are you talking to me, or something about 9 weeks away? I'd talk about today, this afternoon, tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon. After that, forget about it. Somebody said to me, like, next Monday. I'd like, but it's just one of those things. It's just a reaction to, I suppose, always being on the treadmill, always running fairly hard, and, you know, so on and so forth. That's me personally.
So those are amazing insights into the mind of a chef. And I've always kind of found that it's because the job is so immediate and it's so short term, like everything is started and finished within a very short period of time, and you see immediate results, and it's constant just reaction, and as you said, just day to day kind of. So yeah, planning ahead is difficult. And then I suppose that presents it's a massive transition for chefs to go from just being a cook in a kitchen to running a business and having to think more long term and more strategically, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the hardest thing, actually. Yeah, it's the hardest thing, honestly, and for anyone who does it, you know, it's big up to them, and that's why kind of working for yourself is a huge move. You know, and you can, you know, sometimes you can get away without core skills, and other people will you know, provide them for you, you know, accountants and bookkeepers and so on and so forth. But you're better off having a good understanding of the wide range of responsibilities and the things that make successful restaurants work. You know, like, there are times gone by where I suppose, you know, like, you know, the demands of my own kitchen were probably only 30% of my overall, 40% of my overall workload. So, you know, if you can imagine you're there in a kitchen and you're employed by somebody and you're working away, you know, your singular objective is to achieve, you know, do your mise en place, do your prep and do your service and your own section. And, you know, of course, then you become, you know, maybe a sous chef, you get a little bit more, and a head chef more again. And then, you know, for head chefs, it's not easy as well, because, you know, they're kind of looking after responsibility of whatever's in the brigade, whether it be 2, 4, or in our case, 12 or 14. And there's the ordering and the demands and quality, production, discipline, you know, and then you layer on top of that like HR, hygiene, you know, all the standards and practices that we have to have, and, you know, like up to getting food swabbed now and again, kitchen swabbed out, you know, food poisoning, the pressures, you know, and then if you take that as a step up from the head chef to the entire business, yeah, it's huge actually. And yeah, I think small people who own catering businesses don't get enough credence, I suppose, for what they actually do, because I feel as, you know, I know people who have bigger businesses than I, but, you know, they ring the HR department and say, you know, listen, I got a problem here, you know, you know, can I send somebody up to you, or, you know, what do you think? Or, you know, they have a finance department, they have in-house accountants, you know, they have people to deal with all of the sectors, and you kind of are a bridging, overarching vision as the leader, but you have all these kind of facilities underneath you, whereas small restaurants, you know, you know, you can, you know, we all know we go into a restaurant one day and things are perfect, and then the extraction goes down, or something simple physically like that, or somebody doesn't show up, or, you know, whatever, somebody has an accident in the workplace, or, you know, it's just the innumerable amount of things. Because at the end of the day, you know, as I said, you know, restaurants about an exchange of energy, and that needs lots of people, and that's why it's a very heavy cost in your you know, the biggest cost in my checkbook and anyone's checkbook is your labor cost. And, you know, that's what makes the restaurant industry hard, because it requires a lot of labor. So you have a lot of people working for you, and then you service a lot of people. And at the end of the day, when you're dealing with that amount of people, then, you know, anything can happen, that's for sure, you know. I'd love to own a car park or something like that, you know, just the gate going up.
Yeah. Or as I remember, I remember a well-known hotelier in Ireland saying one time, you know, that they figured out it's the easiest way to make money is when people are sleeping. So like selling rooms is where you want to make your money, much easier than running a restaurant. But I agree with you that, you know, the skill set of chefs and people who run their own restaurants is really mind-boggling, and we really don't get enough credit at all. But I'm wondering, in addition to all of that extra responsibility of, you know, running your own business, is it also, and I'm just wondering, in your experience, you know, as someone who's really passionate about food and, you know, about the provenance of the food and the producers and the creation of a dish, is it a difficult transition to have to step away from a lot of that really creative role and the day-to-day involvement with the food to, you know, running the business? And like, how much does that kind of, you know, I suppose kind of interfere with your identity as, you know, as a chef, because you basically become a business owner rather than a cook? And I suppose, how much did you miss that, or how much did you manage to be able to stay in touch with that?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. When you assume the leadership role in a business, you know, it does take you away from some of the core your core loves and passions, of what you got into it for. And there's no question about it that over the years, you know, there are times in my working life that, you know, I've been so distracted by solving other problems within the business, some that can be medium term and so on and so forth, that yeah, you're not there at that coal face, you know, actually thinking about, you know, the quality of products and this, that, and the other. Obviously you've other people to do that for you, but there's times actually I haven't, you know, obviously chapter 1 we've 12 or 14 chefs, and you know, I'm on the pass with my head chef. We plate, you know, everything, and we, you know, make sure the quality of everything goes out of the kitchen, pass on our nose, and you know, you're calling the timing, you know, all that kind of thing. But it's not cooking yourself. And there are times where I have to go over to my Italian restaurant and fill in for, you know, the head chef and the night off, and I just start cooking again. I go, oh Jesus, I'd love to just be here full time cooking some nice simple pasta dishes, and you know, just free flow, you know, and you can kind of do anything, you know. The thing is, I say to people about, you know, a restaurant like chapter 1 is that I suppose one of the things that kind of starts to occur to you, and I suppose wears on you a little bit as you go further on, is that, you know, your journey is initially fueled by the excitement of, you know, becoming a chef, then becoming successful as a chef, and then becoming an owner, and then trying to become a successful business. And that the passion, that kind of passion, you know, sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. My daughter just came in and grabbed a chair and she distracted me. Sorry, where was it? The passion. Sorry, Ruth. You maybe let's get back.
No worries. Yeah. Like I
it'll come back to me then.
Yeah.
What were you asking me? Sorry, what were you asking me?
What was I asking you? I can't remember. I think I got distracted.
Yeah, so when it does.
Moving away from the cooking, exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, so you do lose that. But sorry, what I was going to say about a business like chapter 1 is that even though you're rotating your products, you're trying to use, you know, different products, different suppliers. Oh my God, this is great. You know, it's a vinegar from somewhere or whatever it is, and this, that, and the other. But actually, we cook in very narrow parameters. So what we do is, you know, it's quite narrow. We change the product all the time, but the type of construction of food and the quality and the attention to detail, it's very narrow. It's a very narrow band of operation. So you're always operating in a very narrow band, which is highly pressurized. And I suppose that's the thing actually that kind of gets to you in the long run, you know, as you go on. I think I'm 33 years in the kitchen now and 35 years in the restaurant industry. And I know that you could be doing different things, you know, using different foods every day, or the different foods and different dishes, but it's very, the pressure and the narrowness of the parameters which you can operate on are tricky. Whereas if I go to the Italian and it's like, oh, let's do a dish with that or do that, you know, it doesn't have to be constructed with the protein, you know, for, you know, flavors with it, you know, presentation is to be immaculate and detail, and you know, it's just more free flow, throw a bit of this in, throw a bit of that in. And so it kind of reminds me of, you know, what I got into the business for. And I think if you ask anybody who's a chef patron, that, you know, which takes me kind of to something else, is that, you know, in chapter 1, that, you know, we try to create an atmosphere that people feel at ease in, so that they feel supported and respected. And you know, we've got 1,000 recipes actually on a touchscreen in the kitchen. I never knew how many it was, but I switched the program there a few months ago, and I said to you, man, can you count how many is there? And he said, yeah, there's like 997 or something like that. These are all recipes we've done in chapter 1 over the years. They're not taken out of other people's books and stuff. There might be influences that we do our own recipes, and then we say, okay, that's our version or whatever. And so yeah, we do that because, you know, if you create an environment that is frenetic and is stressful and is aggressive and all the rest of it, then for me that stifles people's ability and creativity. And I never thought that some of the kitchens that were highly pressured were very creative. I see creativity in some of the kitchens in Spain and so on and so forth, but there's a totally different environment there. I think, yeah, so that was something to kind of always in the back of my mind. And if you want to get the best out of people, you've got to get them to that sweet spot where you can actually do that, and they're not petrified about picking up something the wrong way or whatever. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that brings me on nicely to kind of moving from your own experiences, I suppose, to staff and what you've kind of seen over the years in terms of the teams that you've employed, and I suppose, like, what are some of the kind of issues that you've seen in terms of chefs and their kind of mental health and wellness over the years, and I suppose to what degree do you feel that that's something that as a head chef you really need to kind of address, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I suppose I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that, like, of the hindsight of my own experience, and you can use that as a template when you're looking at younger chefs, and some of them were under pressure, and some of them would be falling into all the pitfalls that I did, and and so they can relate to you, and it's easier for me to relate to them. I mean, in terms of I suppose in terms of I kind of nobody's perfect, and I wasn't always perfect myself, and there were years when kitchen was more frenetic than it is now, and you learn by your own experiences, and you fall over, and you get up a bit stronger, and you keep doing that, and it forms it helps you form your own opinions, which are stronger and clearer, and as I said earlier, I mean, the things that I try to do with young chefs is I think if you support and respect people, if they know they're supported and respected, the most basic human need is to be heard and understood, by the way, and if people think that you're not hearing them or understanding them, you can't really connect with them. I challenge them, in terms of how they work, how they can improve, and how we can monitor that, how they come in, how they start, and where they go to, and we would have very clear kind of guidelines of that in an induction manual, which is quite comprehensive actually, which gives an awful lot of things. We have it, and then I train them. And of course, we do have ongoing day-to-day stuff, which everyone does have, but we put aside one morning a month to do other things that they may never encounter. So tempering chocolate, make puff pastry, and some not always I, but one of my chefs who's has that core skill would do it. And we all come in and do something there, have lunch or whatever else. And we have a training program for the entire restaurant, both front and back, which is very extensive, and it's written up along with all the things that we need to do as a restaurant, such as clean the canapes once a year and all that kind of thing, the legislative things, and then all the objectives that we write earlier in the year. And then we write these objectives into format where we can start working on them during the year, and some are short-term, medium-term, long-term. So we train people, and so I think that if you respect people and you train them and you challenge them, then a lot of other issues fall into the background, because I think they feel respected, and I think that the thing that chefs most want actually from a kitchen is to be challenged and to be trained, and if you can provide that, they'll stay longer, because most chefs move on when they feel that rightly or wrongly, they feel that they've learned enough where they are, or the menu never changes or whatever. So we have managed over the years to put together, an amazing calendar that, our chefs can go to wine training as well. And we do extensive wine training at the front, and one part of it would be how to combine foods and wine, and why different foods go with different wines, and sweet, acidic, and stuff like that. So we would have a session on that for them. And, we tried to take them to give them some training they don't have access to. I mean, I've done kind of training on, like, I did one day on the finances of a restaurant and the P&Ls of a restaurant, and chefs and front of house. We have 4 times a year people coming in who might be champions of other industries, not necessarily the restaurant industry, but like we could have a motivational speaker, we could have somebody to talk about addiction, we can have somebody from, could we say, Middleton whiskey that does the Middleton tasting. So I think we have 6 of them a year, and then we have for the kitchen we have one a month, which is separate to that, and then the kitchen people can also attend the general thing. So if you can put in structure, the problem with the restaurant industry is that everybody is running around at 999 miles an hour, and trying to bolt on structures and times for training other than running around the kitchen as you do every day is extremely hard. And it dawned on me that it's actually impossible unless you can find some sort of method of putting some structure into that. And this is what we came up with, and it works for us. And we got a calendar done, which we had custom made. And so on every week of every month of the year, we have a forward note of what we're doing. So the kitchen then would have one whiteboard of their own, which is done out in a monthly, and the restaurant would have their whiteboard, and they take off the master plan what they need to do each week, each day, each week. And these are sometimes in legislative stuff like review the asset or so on and so forth. But at least we know that we have a plan every week, and sometimes if we don't get to it, we don't get to it. But things like outside speakers, I would book them in advance, and they're booked in, and they're booked in the 6 times a year, and then we know that's done, a done deal type of thing. The more of that you can do, the better, because like, we're all the same. We can always find 10 other things or excuses not to do something, and find 1 or 2 to do it. So that's our method. And so those kind of structures help me as well to involve other people and stop the kind of putting, start giving people, responsibilities and giving. I'm stuck on the word now. Delegation. Sorry.
Yeah.
Chefs like that. It's no wonder chefs forget it.
Delegation is definitely a hugely challenging thing, I think, for any entrepreneur. But I think, I think it's a very difficult transition, isn't it, to be able to hand over that responsibility to other people. But it's essential. It's an essential thing No, I was going to say, but learning how to delegate really is essential to growing a successful business.
Yeah, it is. And do you know what? Look, we all get accused of it over the years. I don't think any person who hasn't trod the path that I have doesn't get accused of, you don't delegate, or you can't delegate. And sometimes it's conditional, sorry, for me, I just feel, it's the way I started off, and you start off with yourself and 2 or 3 chefs, and somebody out the front and 2 or 3 waiters, and it just grows and grows, and it's just, it's expediency. You have half the amount of time that other managers have to manage, and you just have to make 10 decisions in every 10-minute period, and it's just everything from like, is that the right scent to put in the toilet, to oh, the chairs were scuffed, or table 6 didn't show up, and table 8 is acting up, or so it's incredible, and you just form this deep habit of just making decisions quickly for the sake of expediency and not messing around, because you're on the clock all the time. It's tricky, but
the trainings
necessary to delegate and to delegate out. And if you can share your vision with people and you can do it in a structured way, then I think what's got easier for me is that I'm now carrying around 28 employees have a similar vision to what the main vision of the restaurant is and the focus of the restaurant, because you see they're all looking at, for instance, that the fact that we try to move on, we try to move our quality, try to keep up with international standards, but also that there's a vision on the wall with the calendar, the yearly calendar every year. I can't recommend it enough to people, to be honest with you. And I do realize that there'll be people out there saying, well, yeah, it's grand for you. You have a big, fine restaurant up there in Dublin. It's busy. And, and that is the case. And I do have great staff. And, there's probably more pick of a staff in Dublin than there is, out in rural Ireland. And I understand all that. And I do get that. But everybody can employ what I'm talking about in some small measure that suits their business and their time and available time. But just if you get into the habit of doing it, then it becomes, people share your vision, because your vision is explained to them, not just your vision on your daily work, how you work daily, but also on where you're going as a business. And we explain that to them every year. We have, in January, we do the objectives for the year, and we have, we would talk to the kitchen staff and the restaurant staff separately on what our vision for the year is. And once they see that they are involved in that vision, and they can see how they can make that, they can help with that plan, then they become very involved, very much more involved.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think you can't expect people to share your vision unless you actually communicate it to them. So like the starting point has to be that people actually understand, that you're telling people what your vision is. And I'm wondering, like you said, people might say, look, Chapter One, it's a very established business, and you have those structures in place. Of course, you have to work hard to get to that point. But if there were maybe two things that restaurants, chefs, providers could do in terms of that aspect of, number one, kind of opening up the communication to make people feel supported and know that they can, I suppose, be open and talk about things, and two, just something that they can do to support kind of ongoing training and learning at their kitchen. Are there two simple things that you think everyone could be doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that talking to people on an individual basis is very important, and we do that, and I do that, and my head chef does that, but I always make a point of doing it myself, because I know at times they kind of look, up at me and say, I want to know that he respects me and he listens to me, and I think that's hugely important. So just respecting them, listening to them, and communicating with them, and I pull them aside and do that once or twice a year. And I think that we do an appraisal, and I think that's really important, because look, it's not unlike COVID. The thing that drives people crazy about COVID, apart from the obviously shocking situation of people dying from it, but is that it's a wait and see thing, and people don't do well if they don't know the north, south, east, and west, and that's because then everybody starts guessing, and then everyone starts this negative trend and gets stressed and so on and so forth. And that's and that's the same for young chefs or young employees, both. both sides of the swing door. I do think there's a different dynamic in the kitchen than the front of the house, and they are different. They're slightly different set of people, to be honest with you. That might seem a really stupid and obvious thing to say, but yeah, I find I don't know, if you're talking about mental health, I find that sometimes, yeah, this is kind of a different, for me, is a different feeling between the two sets. Maybe you know, we've slightly older waiters, and the chefs tend to be slightly younger, and they're still, like I was, like, you know, flailing around in the mud of the newbie in the industry and falling into all the pitfalls and traps. And maybe it's the really hard edge of the kitchen, you know, adrenaline and so on and so forth. This, that, and that. But organization is you know, listening to people is one, and appraising them, and organization is the other. They're the same, you know. Just it's organization is huge, and if they see that there's organization there, I think that's a huge thing for them, you know.
I just want to remind people, if they want to ask you any specific questions, they can put them in the question panel. We have a couple of questions in that I'm going to come back to. But what I wanted to ask you, I know that you've made some changes in recent years in Chapter 1 around working hours and those kind of things. And I suppose I wanted to ask you, what were some of the kind of issues that you recognised that, you know, instigated those changes, and what were the changes that you've made, and what impact have they had?
Yeah, for me as a business person, number one was the recession happened, and we came through that well. But what I did realize is that, like, the lunch, say, for instance, was just a different thing. And even if you did 40, you know, the spend is low and people weren't drinking that much, and it could be, you know, older people who, you know, retired, who weren't working, you know, today. But whoever we were getting, you know, they were just like, they weren't coming like and going back to work like the business lunches of old, where they either went back to work or they didn't. And it just couldn't get people into the restaurant until about 1:30, 1:45, because the simple answer was that none of them, even if they were business people, they were taking the rest of the day off, because this thing about drinking and going back to the office was just completely, it was falling out of the culture totally. And people were worried after recession that their desks would even be there if they went out for lunch when they came back. And so they entertained mostly on their own time, which is the night time. And I suppose there was a bit more of a boom in the nighttime entertaining and less. But I just started to see that, you know, there was a lot of effort going in sometimes at lunchtime. And not always the return. Now there is an element to, I'm an old-fashioned restaurateur in the sense that, you know, there's a PR aspect to lunch. So you're always taught that, like, you know, Jesus, you know, you got to be open. And if you're open, people know you're open and they come. And if they come, they might come back at dinner time and all that kind of thing. You're giving away your lunch for half nothing. And I just thought, I suppose with the hindsight of experience, I would never have questioned that when I was younger, because I was just didn't have that vision or peripheral vision or business acumen. And I just thought that, you know, do we always have to be on the treadmill running at 900 miles an hour, flogging ourselves, and sometimes being busy fools? And or should I start thinking about, it was that plus, you know, the pressure of workload for myself and for staff, and or having to have 1.5 crews of staff, which was very expensive. And so it's all going the opposite way, because, you know, whether we like it or not, the cost of running fine dining in my case is just going to get higher and higher, and there will be fewer and fewer, and you have to be in the super premium, and I think that has to be 2 stars and up type of thing, would be my opinion. And I could see that the visions weren't aligning, and I said, I just felt that I needed to do something about that. And so I started thinking about closing a couple of lunches, and I looked at closing, and the closing lunches was going to cost me X amount a week for 3 lunches, which was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I started to look at, you know, if I did that, you know, I would need only 1 crew and not 1.5 crews. And I did a cost benefit analysis, and then I said, it's time to do it. And, you know, for me, it was about then presenting the opportunity to staff. We're going to be open 6 services, and this is what I'm thinking, and I want you to work 5.5 of those 6, so you get a shift off every 2 weeks. We work 6 shifts, 5 shifts, 6 shifts, 5 shifts every other week. So an 11-shift rotating fortnight. And so we did that, and, you know, like everybody, I was a bit concerned about, you know, PR aspect of it being open, and also losing, you know, X amount of turnover. But it turned out at the end of the year, the first year, that we turned over the exact same amount of money that we did with the 3 less lunches. I decided to open at 5 o'clock instead of 5:30 for pre-theatre, and we have a strong pre-theatre anyway, and most people actually now don't go to theatre, but it's such a kind of a, it's so well known, should I say, that we just get all sorts of people, you know, tourists want to dine early, 40th birthday, 50th birthday, mum's birthday, whatever it is, you know, we pretty much fill our pre-theatre to 30 to 40 pre-theatre every night. And so
I've lost audio. I have lost Ross's audio. Is that just me?
Ross, you've just muted yourself. There you go.
Yeah. Don't know what happened there.
Sorry, mate. Okay. We lost. Yeah, I don't know what happened either. Anyway, do you mind if I go to some questions now from people who are in the audience, Ross?
Yeah, no problem.
Good stuff. Well, a couple of comments. First of all, someone said that they really appreciate you vocalizing your feelings of drowning in your business and feeling it's me against the world, that they could relate to that. And Derek Riley just want to say he's really enjoying the conversation, open and honest and very, very insightful. Somebody asking, this could be a sensitive question, what's the age difference? What are the age differences in the kitchen from younger to older?
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll tell you, it was myself and one kitchen porter about the same vintage, and I could tell you what makes me feel really old, Ruth, is when I say to some of my young chefs, say, oh yeah, he's talking about his mom or dad, and I'd say, how old's your dad? He says, well, he's 40, and I go, oh, holy Jesus. Here I am at the tender age of 56. So yeah, the ages go from about 35 down to 21 or 2, I guess. Yeah, we usually, our usually youngest, we kind of look for somebody who's 2 or 3 years out of college type of thing. And, you know, then they come into us, and then we kind of try to kind of teach them how we do things and so on and so forth. So yeah, you go about 20, 21 and up to about the mid-30s. I'd say that's probably, you know, I'd say you could count the amount of people over 50 in the kitchens in Ireland in 3 hands. But maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. It's the old phrase, the young man's game, but yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. And we had a question as well on what advice you give young chefs in relation to developing habits for well-being as they start out in their culinary careers.
Yeah, I think the thing is that you have to understand that you can't do kind of heaps amount of work, therefore stress, lots of adrenaline, and then eat crap and drink or whatever. I've tried that, it doesn't work. I just want to tell everybody. And it's about a balance. It's like everything. And of course, the thing that people find difficult is that, you know, what kind of really makes me cringe and I hate is when I have young people who come into the kitchen and they might be like play GA at a good level, and you'd ask them 6 months later, you know, how's the guy? Oh no, I didn't. Or, you know, people tell you, oh, I did a trial for, you know, I've had numerous kids. I did a trial for Chelsea and I didn't get it, and I was a good soccer player, and, you know, they'd be 23, 24, and I go, so do you play now? And they say, no, I tried to give it all up when I started cooking. And there's this thing that people feel they have to give everything up when they start cooking. They don't actually. Look, I acknowledge that, you know, if you can't play competitive rugby or competitive soccer if you're probably working every night, I understand and get that. But you wouldn't be in a kitchen if you were, you know, a professional rugby player or a soccer player or something like that. But you can play on a Sunday and you can pick off the odd night. And like in our case, we close, so we're not open Saturday lunch, we're not open Sunday, we're not open Monday, and then some of the other mornings and so on and so forth. So I do encourage people to get involved in something, and that kind of breaks my heart when I kind of hear people just use it as an excuse to give up. But essentially, you have to balance off the work with time for yourself, times to de-stress without drinking and whatever else. And, you know, it has to be positive de-stress, and, you know, that could be exercise and whatever else you want to do, whether it's walking or, you know, whatever you do in life, running up a mountain, whatever it is. But exercise is huge and eating is huge. And, you know, we do our best to discourage people from coming into work with 2 liters of Red Bull and 5 tins of Coke. And, you know, in fact, we don't allow people in the kitchen with them. So, but I provide whatever they want and say, go and eat an apple, go and eat an orange. But this habit of working hard, maybe going out half the night and then getting up, and, you know, because you're working hard and the adrenaline and not eating properly, and then, you know, keeping yourself going on sugars and carbs just doesn't take you to the right place. And you have to find that balance, whatever it is for you and whatever works, without starting to lecture everybody on how to live their lives. But if you don't have some balanced approach to it, then it doesn't work.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I think that issue of balance is huge. And I mean, all the things you talked about there in terms of the kind of bad eating habits and the going out and everything, for sure have been strongly part of the culture in the industry in the past. But I suppose, do you feel like that's changing? And have the hours that you had, the kind of new hours you've put in place in Chapter 1 made a big difference to that for people? Because you mentioned earlier on, you know, and I think that it's one of the big issues in the industry is like that thing of like you're working hard, and then when you're not working, you're kind of just recovering because you're working so hard. So again, that thing of actually having time that's not just work or recovery from work, that's actually living your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's changing. I think the younger generations now, I think they understand a little bit more. I mean, it's all around us all now about, you know, you can't live your life without seeing, you know, stuff on how you should eat, and, you know, how exercise, you know, is good for you, and whether it's yoga and this, that, and the other. And so the general environment is more informed and I think more educated. And I really do see a different approach. And it's not to say that I think that young people are more prepared to share their burdens as well than they were. I certainly feel that over the last 4 or 5 years, for sure. But look, hey, it's still, you know, it's whether you're working 40 hours a week in a kitchen or 50 or whatever it is, then, you know, it's a stressful environment. And, you know, you have to be, you know, look, we all did it, everyone's done it, and there's no reason to think that they won't continue doing it. But I generally do see, and any of the young chefs that I've had who kind of would be presenting with, mental health situations where they don't feel good in themselves. And mostly it's an environmental overload from work and doing all the things that I've said, but that's just different from people then who do have, that's environmental pressure, making people feel under pressure and blue and whatever, as distinct from mental health, strong psychiatric mental health issues, which is not my arena at all. And people need to seek help, relevant help in that sphere. But what I've seen is a lot of low-level environmental stuff, and what I try to explain to them is, like, if you can do one thing, you can have a very frenetic social lifestyle, and if you try to do the kind of work that we're asking you to do at the same time, what will happen is you'll say in 6 months, this is too hard, I'm not doing this. But it's not actually the work that's too hard, it's the workload on top of staying out half the night. But however, if people want to do that, that's fine, and find an easier job, that's fine too. We've all done it. Let he without sin cast the first stone. But I do, the people that the young staff that I would have sat down and talked with, and considerable amount of it actually, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years, they respond very well. And responding well means that, they're open to being influenced, and they listen to reason. And I'll tell you, the ones that do, for sure, you see just a complete change in character and personality and outlook, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's really, things are moving in in the right direction. We're up to our time, and one thing that we haven't spoken about at all is the recent events of the past year with COVID and the impact that has had. And that's okay, because people are probably a bit sick of listening to it and thinking about it. But somebody has asked, so maybe you could just give us a very brief answer to this. Do you think COVID will change people's minds about being more mindful of staff, stress, and maybe simplifying menus and kitchen demands? And I suppose just briefly to answer that, and what you think the kind of impact has been of the past year on people.
Yeah, I think that, obviously we've had a time of deep contemplation within the industry, and I think that will clear people's minds. I would think that people will be more definite about how they're going to run their businesses going into the future, and somewhat, consumer patterns will affect that as well. I will say that I think people will be very mindful of minding the skills set that they have. My one slight fear is the overhang of people retraining, going into other industries, and avoiding the skill set of an already very depleted skill set in our labour force in a lot of ways, and that's going to be tricky. But I do think that I will say that the restaurant industry is an incredibly resilient industry, and I know that some people unfortunately may find it difficult when we reopen and to get back on the path as patterns change and there's not as many people in offices, and that's so on and so forth. That's deeply unfortunate. I do know that from the time we opened that we got overwhelming feedback from customers, and affirmation that I will take with me for the rest of my life from Chapter 1, of how valued the restaurant industry and how much the restaurant and going to a restaurant means to people. That was just a revelation to me, because it's a young industry in Ireland, and I wasn't sure whether the restaurant industry was firmly set in its psyche and its habits and its appreciation and its life, and that is the case. And so that's fantastic. I think that once we get over this, there is a hugely bright outlook for the restaurant industry. I think in Ireland and Dublin certainly, I think there'll be a couple, 2 or 3 huge bonus years. I think the restaurant industry will regroup and it will kick on. It always does. I mean, you know, it's a very resilient industry. It's based on, I suppose, a very flexible, young, transient workforce, and that's what feeds, that's the blood in its veins, and they will always, you know, that workforce will always come and go and move on in the industry and move up in the industry. And that's why you can dial down very quickly in terms of recession and dial back up very quickly in terms of upturns. And that's, you know, if you go to Argentina or Buenos Aires, it's full of restaurants and yet the economy is terrible, you know, and it's just, it has a habit of surviving and then opening up again. And, you know, for every young chef out there, I just want to say this is just a very small blip in your careers, and nothing will change. It will get even more creative and more cutting edge and more important, and so on and so forth, you know. But I do
Thank
see
you so much, Ross.
I do see the next kind of, I think the next disruptor in the industry going into the future will be the appliance of tech into the domestic kitchen and people starting to cook more at home. It's a way off yet, but I think that's probably the next big disruptor. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't provide opportunity for chefs and, you know, people, you know, chefs going into the tech end.
Well, that positive outlook for the industry is a great point for us to finish up on. I think that's really inspiring to kind of hear about that resilience that is in the industry. And so we'll just wrap up with a comment here from Alan Cruitt, who said, Ross is a real champion for a better working environment and lifestyle. Looking forward to Chapter 1 reopening, as are we all, I'm sure. Ross, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's really insightful. Really, really appreciate the open and honest conversation. And yeah, hopefully we can chat again at some point.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity. It's great to talk to you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you. So just to remind people that we have a couple more events coming up in our Mind Your Mind month, which Chef Network, with the generous partnership from BWG Food Service. So on the 26th, there's a free online yoga session tailored for chefs with Aidan Burke. And then on the 28th of January, we have a talk on food and mental health, so very apt to what Ross was talking about in terms of improving eating habits, which is something that we all know a lot of us could do with working on. So you can register for those now on chefnetwork.ie. And just to draw your attention to the handout section in your panel on the webinar, which has a handout with some information on mental health support. So if anyone does need support, you'll find some information there. Thank you again to Ross, thanks to Rebecca in the background with all the tech, and to BWG for their support. And thanks to all of you for joining us.